We're live. Hopefully you guys can hear me all right. And again, like I said, since there was a delay on the YouTube side, I don't even know if it's going. It says it is. Why can't I see it? There it is. Haha. I win. Okay. Excellent. All right. So if you have questions, type them in on the feed. You can email them ahead of time to applications@melco.com. You can send them over, on the usually Wednesday or Thursday. I'll post in a handful of the groups to see if there's any questions you guys might have. So I'll get started with the ones that were sent in. I did not get a whole bunch, so if you have some, please feel free to type them in. So this first one, if I convert a vector, how do I add split lines so that I can change things between satin and fill stitches? Okay, so let's start with that. Over here, this is just, I'm not sure you'd call this as complex, but it's artwork I had in the, you guys have this too, so let me actually go open it so you can see where it is. If you go to your C drive, designs, graphics, in there is the Egyptian eye. So if you want to play along, there it is. So first off, conversions are really fast and easy. So I can come over here. Actually, let's do it this way. I'm going to use the stitch graphic region, and there we have it. I've got a fill, and I'll do the same thing to this one. And I'm going to change the color so we can see it. So all I did was click on that stitch graphic region, choose the shape down here that I want to fill in, and now we have that. Now, as you'll see there, this is mostly just straight fill, and the question was, well, how do I add, change this to be a series of satins and fill? So I'm going to copy and paste this and move it over just so we have something as reference just to look at in a little bit. So let's start with this bottom one. So I can come over here, and right there is insert splice. So anytime you want to modify something, you have to click on the shape first of what you want to modify. So I click on that guy, and then over here is your insert splice. I'm going to hold that down and say insert curve splice. So all I want to do here is I'm just adding splices where I feel like it. So let's say I want to make this have more of a, satins going above and below my eyeball. So I'm just clicking through, adding whatever splices entertain me at the moment. So I'll do that. And let's say one here. Okay. All right, so I got a bunch of splices. Now what do I do? Because they're still not satins, not what I'd want them to look like anyway. So if you select the shape, and then right here, insert stitch direction. I'm going to delete the stitch direction that's there currently, and now I'm going to start adding them. So by adding the stitch directions for each of these different sections, you can dictate what it's going to look like. And you want to add as few as necessary, but as many to get the look that you're going for. So by taking that auto-generated shape and just adding a few splices, I can go from something that's pretty flat to a little more interesting with just a few clicks, just a few additions. So let's see if the chat on YouTube is working yet. Yeah, there it is. Good morning, River. City Creative. Hi. All right. So let's say for the eyebrow, I want to do the same thing. I don't really need to add anything. I'm just going to delete that stitch direction and add some additional, and then maybe change that from a fill to a satin. Although since it was an auto conversion, you'll see in my object properties, it's set to auto. If I want it to be a satin, I'll have to go and tell it to be a satin. Now, how many of you have seen this? Where when you tell it to be a satin, you'll get nice satin stitches, then you'll get this weird fill section, and then more satin. If you're not sure of why that's happening, it's driven by your object properties. So right here, where it says use fill stitch lines for greater than a number, what that's telling you is if any length of stitching is going to be bigger than 60 points, 6 millimeters, however you want to look at it, it's going to convert it over into fill stitch. Why does it do that, or why would you want to do that? Well, you don't want your satin stitches being so long that they're snag worthy, right? I mean, think about it. If I did a column for like the letter T, and that column on the T or the I was an inch wide, and I had that on my pocket, what would happen when I grab my pen and try to go in and out? If it's just a 1-inch piece of thread, it's going to be much easier for me to damage it, for it not to not hold up well. So what you really want to do is, you know, have satin to a point, but at some degree, you get over 60 to 70 points, you really don't want it to be long satin stitches anymore, unless you know the application. For instance, a hat with puff, well, that's not going to be as prone to snagging as something on a left chest. All right, so all right, not 600, let's put that back to 60. And if I still want to get rid of that, maybe I do an auto split. You know, I'm really prone to that. I like that look, but it's a personal preference. So you can do different things to get a different look along there. And let's say on here, not that this is something you want, but what if you want to add splits down here rather than going from one edge to the other? Well, where the insert hole, if you hold that button down, not sure you realize there's an insert split line. Well, what that lets you do is add lines mid-shape, you know, and anytime the stitching crosses one of those points, one of those lines that I just drew in, it's going to add a needle penetration down. So that's another way you can kind of break up those long sections to make them look more like satin stitches. Okay. All right. Oops, get out of that by hitting escape. There. So we went from a straight conversion to something with a few clicks in a pretty short amount of time. That looks a lot more interesting, at least to me. So let me quick see if we have any questions typed up anywhere. Hey Juliet. And Sail Captain 86. Oh, Norman, welcome. All right, everyone. Let's see what else we have. Other questions. Oops, there we go. Okay, so we covered that one. When embroidering lettering on t-shirts, there's some holes. I use satin stitches, 0.4 density, and a needle, a 65 needle, so one of the smaller needles. So with your with shirts, the biggest thing that I've noticed okay, I'll come back to the question I just saw typed in on YouTube. Sorry, it popped up and distracted me. The biggest thing I could suggest for this one here is to look at your needle type. So you said you're using a 65 needle and a density of that. You can try increasing your density a little bit. You can also make sure your needle doesn't have a burr on it. Okay, so new needles are always a good thing to try. Make sure you have it at a right angle. What I notice the most time when I see those holes that start popping up, in general, it's because the needle has a burr on it. Okay, so that's the first place I would start, is with the new needle. You might try going to a little bit of a more spread out density, so that you're also not doing needle penetration so close to one another so that it's tearing the fabric. So that might be another thing to consider. So those would be the starting place that I would go with anyway, and see where you go, what happens. Okay, so we had a question on, they had this kind of design, and this pin is here for reference, so you can see how tiny that satin stitch around the edge is. And the question was, how can you do that? Some different tricks that you can do is, first off, you look at your digitizing. Actually, let me go to the machine first. Whenever you're trying these files and you want to get that raised look, try loosening up your active feed so that it's not quite so tight. That will allow, you know, the stitches not to sink down in. And when I say loosen your active feed, that means increase it. So let's say you were trying to run this at an active feed of 4. Well, maybe try 6 or 7. Something a little bit more so that the stitching isn't pulled down so tight. So that would be one. Another is then to go look at the digitizing aspect of it. So what I would suggest, or what I would try personally, is I would do a few single center line under, like a walk stitch center line around there a few times, honestly, to build up that thread so that when it comes over with the satin stitch, you have something to sit on, right? So that would be my first thing, is run a center stitch, a center walk, okay, around that satin stitch. Another would be to look at potentially laying your satin stitches. So if you've got a satin stitch, depending on the width, it's even a good idea to sew one satin at, let's say, a density of 6, 6.0, 6. millimeters, and kind of so that you're not building up your stitch count. So run that, and then your next cover stitch on top of that, then increase the size. So if you had it a 15 width, maybe you'd put then a 20 width on top. So here, let me quick show you, just because I know what I'm saying, but just to make sure it's clear. Let's say I would run this, like I said, it depends on how wide those are, but just for grins, I'm going to put that at 15. I'm going to turn off the auto density and set that to 6. So you can see I'll add some underlay. Let's go ahead and stay with the center walk, and maybe even do that twice, so that you've got more pieces of thread underneath there to help hold that up. Then what I would honestly do is copy and paste, have that go back on top of it, with this time your width being whatever your final width is, larger, and your density being what you want it to be. So 4, 3.5, whatever it is for the project you're working on. Okay, and then we, of course, on that second one, I don't need all that underlay because we just did a ton of underlay with those other stitches. So then it's just a matter of paying attention to your starts and stops. That one starts there, ends there. So that means I want this one to start here and end there. So that would help build it up, right? Because I've got a satin underneath. Another thing to look at is making sure your satin stitches are not in the same direction as your top one. Your underlay aren't in the same direction as your top stitch. That'll also help hold the stitches up. So if you kind of do a diagonal type stitch through there, that can also help hold the stitches up to give you that more raised look. Okay. What other questions you might have? I have a all right, so we have one. Does anyone know why when I'm trying to send a design to my machine, it erases signature error and won't let me keep going? Not quite sure what you mean by signature error. So when you send a design to the machine, you can only send it if the machine isn't running, right? So it's completed a job, it will load the design to the machine. So every time you load a new design, it's going to get rid of it and load a new one. Okay, so the error, if you're mid-design and you try to load, so you didn't cancel it out or reset a design and you try to send a new one, it won't let it go because the machine thinks it's already doing something. So you would have to reset your design before you can send a new one. If you can let me know if that answers your question, or if not, if you can give me a little more details, I'll see what I can do to help you there. Let's see. Facebook isn't loading any questions, so let me see if I can fix that. All right, because all I see are the ones on YouTube at the moment. All right, I have a quilt I want to stipple. How can I line up the design when I have to move the hoop? All right, so when you're doing that, you would want to look at, there's some videos that have already been done on continuous hoopings. So you would have to have either a point that you're going to always start from. Okay, so let's say it's the bottom left corner. So you're going to repeat that pattern over and over. So then what I would do is chalk out a line so that you can laser left, laser bullseye on that line. It'll rotate center to it, sew out the first one. And then when you do the other ones, rather than laser left, if you do laser left, laser right, I believe, and then laser bullseye, it will left justify so that it will go to that point on there. So as long as your stippling design always starts right at the center, it will continue lining it up. There is a video that was done last year, I think. Nate did it. It was Holly that was repeating on a ribbon. That's the technique you would use for the stippling. You would set up your design the exact same way it was done there to constantly repeat it and continue to line it up. Okay. Ooh, the questions on Facebook. Why do my designs show up in DS with all the... Oh, why do my designs show up in DS with all the colors messed up? Okay. So their embroidery file types do not always save the colors within the file. It depends on the file type itself. So if I load an EXP file, All right, so let's just grab one of these EXPs. What's going to happen is they're expanded. An EXP file, DST files, they don't save the color information within the actual file. So the software will automatically default to these random weird colors, so that you're going to have to color every time. Well, if you then go through and color it to whatever you want it to look like, let's say that's what I want to do, and then I save it as an OFM, even though these are still expanded, the colors will save because I saved it as an OFM file. OFM save the color information. There are other file types that save color information. Jeff, Huss, Pess. Actually, I don't know about Pess for sure. I know Jeff and Huss do. VIPs do. I think Pess do, but I can't remember. But like I said, not every file type actually saves colors in it. So depending on the file type, that's why they drop. Another Facebook question, do you know why my design shop sometimes does not read EPS files? No, I don't. If you have an EPS file that's bothering you, send it over to applications@melco.com and we can take a look at it and see if it's, what might be the issue. So I don't know for sure, but try to get you an answer. Let's see, what else? All right, so that's all the Facebook ones. Let me see. All right, so YouTube, we're all caught up. So back to my questions. All right, so we covered that. Oh, this one's fun. So they did, this was a conversion over into an applique, created the applique, but now they said, my border is really close to the edge for the fabric. How do we fix that? Or is that what we want? Should I do something different? All right, so let's go. I'm going to go to heart this thing just because it's easy. Same technique. So to convert to an applique, you can, of course, either do it manually or use the applique tool. So I'm going to do the applique tool since that's what this question was. And then I always get questions after the fact on how to do it manually, so I'll quick review that too. So when you use the applique input method, right, I'm going to just do the conversion. So the method is right there where you go trace the shape. I don't want to do that. I'm just going to click on change element type. I'm going to say applique and I'm going to add. All right. So now I have the applique, but here's where you'll see that border, that placement is really close. So what do? Well, you can modify it. So I'm going to go into the properties, and this first setup sheet right here is what's driving where all those placements are. I'll tell you, unless you're cutting your fabric out using a laser or a fabric cutter of some sort, whether it be the print and cuts or the something like an eyeline or silhouette, something that cuts, right? Doing a 80%, what you're seeing here, what that's saying is the placement right here is going to be 80% on the fabric, 20% off. I tell you, I can't cut that good if I'm cutting in place on the hoop with some scissors. And I like to do applique. So generally, it's going to depend on what are your skills with cutting in the hoop. Most people, you split it at 50-50. 50% on the fabric, 50% off. When you cut, there's usually enough fabric that the satin stitch will cover it up. I like closer to a 60-40 split. Oops, and of course these went the wrong way. So let's try that again. 60, 60, there we go. So I prefer a 60-40 split with 60% on the fabric, 40% off. I cut really close to it, so that's where that would be what I would suggest. Now the other thing is, if you want to have additional color changes put in, you can always turn on this enable color change after tack down. And right there, that would be a start. Now remember, you can modify every layer of this. So let's say that tack down of the fabric, that one layer of stitching, you want to do two. I like doing it twice just to have the security, because it never fails when I'm cutting the fabric out, I'll end up snipping stitches. So retrace, even with an offset, that helps avoid cutting all the stitches so my fabric's still nice and secured. For the tack down itself, I usually just accept the defaults on that. The cover stitching, again, that's the satin stitch that goes over the top. I prefer tighter densities on that. Again, it's a personal preference. 4.0 is usually kind of the standard that you should aim for, but I like smaller than that. Again, it's just a personal preference. So now I got my 3 color changes. I've got something closer to the edge that I can work with and not have to worry about it. Where my fabric's outside of my satin stitch. Now, just to show how to generate it manually, well, if you don't have the higher level of DesignShop, you're going to have to digitize it yourself in Applique. In that case, you can hold the Shift key down for add. So select the vector shape, hold Shift, click on Select Walk Input Method. Now I have a walk. All right, so I'm going to turn off this vector so you can see it. So I'm just going to copy and paste that, Control C, Control V, and change the color. I have my placement, my tack down, copy, paste, change the color, hold the Control key down this time instead of Shift. So Control, click on that, change this. Tackle is actually a higher level feature, so I'm going to leave it on satin and set the density to 17, the width to 30. Okay, so now I've got a tackle stitch. And then again, I'll duplicate that, set the density to 4, the width to 40. Voila, now I have an applique. Okay, I've got my placement, my tack down, my zigzag to hold it in place, and then my cover stitch. All right, so Facebook, any other questions there? I only see 3, so I'm going to assume no. And it looks like, oh, so on YouTube, this was kind of following up with the question on the EPS with the signature error. How do I get one to help? Do you know where I can set up an appointment? So you can email to talk to tech support. You can either call in to tech support, and the number is on the service site. So if I go to Melco-service, I like showing people where you can find these resources. Technical support via telephone. So if you click on there, where are the phone? There's the phone number. Okay, so you'll need your machine serial number, and you can call in there. Excuse me. Another way, you can email service@melco.com. That'll get you to the service department. If it's just the EPS file, so that's with sending the machine. So yes, you want to talk to service@melco or call the tech support people here. Okay. All right, what else do we have? I don't see any here, so I'll keep on going. Did I answer all this? Yeah, okay, so we covered all that. Oh, let me show you one other thing. So let's say you use the Applique tool. So I'm going to turn off all my manual stuff. And you realized you want that placement stitch twice. Okay, well, what you can do after you've got all your settings happy and you like what you have, you can come over here, go to Operations, Convert to Wireframe, and now those exact stitches are broken up as if you did it manually. So now I can copy or duplicate, let's just duplicate to show you something else, that original placement stitch. So now I've got 4 steps. Okay. All right. Let's see. What other questions? I'd like to know how to convert alphabet stitch from a satin to a thin bean line stitch. So it's like a vintage embroidery font. So I'll show you one thing, which I don't think is what you're asking, and then I'll talk to the other. So I think, let's say any font you have here. Let's do something more interesting. Oh, I don't know. There. Let's do that. So you can always select a font or whatever it is. If I hold my Shift key down, or let's do Control. So Shift is add, Control is replace. So if I hold my Control key down and click on Select Walk Input Method, Control click, now I have that. I can change it over to a bean, and now I have a bean stitch in the shape of that particular font. Okay. Notice these X's. I don't like a style 5 knot on this particular, like on straight stitches. So changing it to a style 1 makes them more embedded. Okay, so that does borders. I think what you're really asking is, how would I have a single down the center of this? Unfortunately, the only way to do that is to do the fun work of digitizing it. You would do a the walk input method, change this to bean, and then you would trace your shape. This is easier to do if you have the vector art rather than just eyeballing it like I'm doing now. I'm just kind of eyeballing, and if I zoomed in it would be a little more accurate than the mess I'm making right now. But, you know, I can trace that, and now I have an S with a silly style 5 knots. Let's get rid of those again. There we go. Okay, so now I have a bean stitch that is in that shape. Now, keep in mind, when you're doing bean stitch type work, it's always fun to bean stitch, what that is a row of single stitches that go from one place to the next multiple times, so that for each stitch you have this many passes. So in this case, every time it goes forward, back, forward, forward, back, forward, forward, back, forward, 3 times. So I have 3 pieces of thread all the way around. If you want it to be a little bolder looking when it actually sews out, you can go to 5. You notice you can go to really big numbers. That's an interesting look, but if you do that, make your stitch length bigger. You know, 3 to 5 is usually fine. Or if you do 3 with a retrace, what do you think that gets you? Well, a retrace, your design goes out and then back. So it does 3 stitches out for each location, 3 stitches back. So you end up with 6 total. Okay, so let's see what else. All right, so I have another Facebook one. Let's see what's there. Is the new Design Shop upgrade coming out this month? I don't know when it's coming out. If I had to guess, it would be sometime next year in January. I don't know. What I would suggest on when is it coming out, call your sales agent and ask them. They're going to have more insight into that than I do. So that would be the best place to look, and they can also, you know, work any deals for you if you're interested in it. All right, let's see. I don't see any others on YouTube yet. All right. Okay, so there is no straight convert from a satin to a single line, unless it was manually digitized. Then of course you can do that. But since you were asking about fonts, you're gonna have to digitize them yourself by tracing them. Okay, I have DS9, and I'm not seeing how to convert a fill to a diamond pattern. Okay, so all the patterns are within. Okay, so I'm gonna grab this guy, hold my shift key down. Oops, grab my vector. Shift, and this time I'm going to go to a fill, to add a fill. So now we have a fill for me to show you where. Now if I go into the properties here, in the properties under top stitching, there's these presets and pattern fills down here. So if you go look under pattern fills, we have diamond. So I can apply that. One of the best things I could suggest if you're going to use these pattern fills is the very first time, when you switch over to the pattern fill here, select one, come up to the top and change this to satin. Before I hit apply, just take a look. See all those fill stitches in there? When I hit apply, look at how much prettier. I just like the satin look better. So again, it's a personal preference. What about an upgrade? There's a question on YouTube. What about an upgrade for the simplified OS? Are you talking about like a new software update, or going from V11 to V12, or what's the question there? Is it just the version, just like an update to the software? Let's see, those come out periodically, and if you do check for updates, it can usually find that for you. Okay, so the updates, I don't know when the next one's coming out. I'm sure, I guess we can try to find that out, but in general, if you do tools, check for update, they're there. You can also, I wonder if it's still maintained. Let's see. So on the FAQ version software, yeah, so Melco software versions. Down here are the latest versions that are out there. So what you can do is check your version, and if you have, you know, 052 or something different than the numbers that are here, you can always email service@melco.com, or talk to tech support or check for updates, and you should be able to get at least to this one. So these are the current versions. Looks like it's maintained. Yeah. Oh, the new hoops, that you can get the hoop updates by going to install the fast clamp stuff. So let's see, fast clamps, installation. Let's see, is it there? Yeah. So you can manually do it there. So if you want to just do it yourself, if you know how, the MDB files are down here. Okay. All right, let's see. Let's see what other questions we have. They don't update to the OS. Oh, I know how, I personally know how to make it update the OS. I'm not sure if that is allowed. So let me add that. I'll see if we can get that either added to the FAQ section for you, or if I can show you how to do that next time. Let me check with the guys. I'm not sure if they want me digging into the into that. So I'll check on that for you. All right. Okay, so we did the diamond fill. Those are all the questions I have that I had sent in. So, any other... Oh, we have some more typed in on Facebook. For some reason, I have to keep on refreshing Facebook. So someone said last they checked it was coming out in... that V11 was coming out in January. That would be my guess, but I don't know for sure. Okay. Any other questions that you guys might have before we call it a day? And I will be back next Friday this time. So we alternate these every Thursday, Friday type thing. Mainly because that V11 was coming out in January. I have a family member that is... my husband's off every other Friday, so he gets annoyed when I'm working on Fridays that he's off. So... All right. Well, any other questions before we call it a day? I don't see any. Okay. Well, I hope these are helpful for you. If you have questions, please feel free to send them in. Put them on the feeds during here. I try to check the prior weeks, to see if there's any other questions. But, ask away, email applications@melco.com, and we'll get them added to the list. So hopefully these are fun and helpful for you, and I will be back next Friday to see what else we can talk about. All right. Well, you guys have a wonderful weekend, and I will be back next week. Bye.